Welcome to the Life Science Success Podcast. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Don, and I am a digital marketer in life sciences. And before we get started today with our podcast, I have a brand new sponsor message from the Bio and the Bayou conference. And so please, so if you haven't yet signed up for the Bio and the Bayou conference this October, please take a look at that conference. And here's the message from the sponsor. Being at the epicenter of the next breakthrough in biotechnology. That moment could happen for you this October at Bio on the Bayou 2025, where Southern innovation meets scientific excellence in the heart of New Orleans. Over 300 of the brightest minds in biotech are coming together for 2 extraordinary days in New Orleans. We're talking groundbreaking research from powerhouses like Tulane, Auburn, the University of Mississippi, Xavier University of Louisiana, and LSU Health. Expect revolutionary technologies, cutting-edge research, and industry-shaping expert panels that you won't find at any other event, plus networking opportunities that could transform your career. This isn't just another conference, it's an intensive 2-day summit where real partnerships form. We leverage the cutting-edge Partnering One platform to ensure that you'll connect with exactly the right people, whether you're seeking investors, research partners, or your next big opportunity. The future of biotechnology is being shaped right here in the broader Gulf South and having a global impact. Will you be part of it? Mark your calendar for October 28th and 29th. Head to bioonthebayou.com right now and secure your spot for the most exciting biotechnology event of 2025. The next breakthrough could be yours. Bio on the Bayou 2025. Register today. In this episode of Life Science Success Podcast, my guest is Bryan J. Stewart. He's the founder and chief executive officer of HDO Health. Bryan is a distinguished board member, certified governance expert, and accomplished executive who's leading the charge in developing innovative medical devices and to address uncontrolled bleeding, the leading cause of preventable death worldwide. So thanks so much for being with me today, Bryan. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. A pleasure to be here. I guess I'll start with a shout out. I didn't know that Bio and the Bayou was the program sponsor, but I'll just give a personal endorsement. I went to the most recent event, had a great time. Everything that was in the ad, this is not a paid endorsement, is true. Great networking, great food, great opportunities to network with other investors, inventors, and the academic institutions. So personal plug for Bio on the Bayou. I'll be there myself next year, hopefully as well. Again, so
that would be great. Yeah, I find it interesting because somebody had said to me the other day. They said, "Well, I would imagine that it's just overloaded with academics, and for sure they're there. I mean, it's not like they aren't, but I also feel like our mutual friend." James Zanowitz has done a great job at creating a platform
Absolutely.
that's just so personal for people. And we were talking about relationships before we got started, and I feel like he's created a platform for that as well. So yeah, it's a great conference.
Awesome
So
event. Yeah.
just to touch a little bit on you, overall, what is it that led you to your current role at HDO, and then also, what made you want to focus in the life sciences industry of all places? I tell people there's a lot easier place to make a living than
Yeah.
life sciences, and especially entrepreneurship in life sciences. So yeah, I'd love to hear more.
Yeah, it's sort of the intersection of my military experience, and then I went to the Ohio State University, and my particular technology and company is a spin out of OSU, Go Bucks, winning the national championship. I guess a little bit of background. I spent about almost 7 years in the Marine Corps as an infantry officer, and then was fortunate enough to transition into the healthcare industry, and have been in multiple segments, in the life sciences, medical device, behavioral health, wound care, did some consulting, and then I've been the CEO of 2 different behavioral health and healthcare companies. So my journey as an entrepreneur and specifically founding HDO Health started about 4 years ago. Candidly, I was just seeking to become a mentor for other entrepreneurs. So I contacted OSU and their entrepreneurship center called the Keenan Center. And pretty quickly, the conversation turned from, hey, we're all good with mentors. What we need is more entrepreneurs who have the wherewithal, the network, et cetera, to help us commercialize this virtual gold mine of intellectual property. So essentially got the catalog of available technologies from OSU. There were about five or six technologies that bubbled up as probably a good match given my background and interest. And then pretty quickly, HDO Health, the technology, the Journiquet, a life-saving medical device that helps prevent bleeding from really traumatic wounds, sort of became the number one match, both from my perspective and from the folks at the Keenan Center. So pretty quickly went from initial conversation to vetting options to meeting my co-inventors and co-founders to negotiating a license agreement to founding the company. And then here we are 3 years later, really trying to get raise a seed round to get the product through final phases of FDA clearance and onto the market.
And in terms of this, can you describe a little bit more about what it is, more specifically around the technology that HDO Health currently has?
Yeah, again, the product name is the HDO Health Journiquet. So it is a junctional tourniquet. A lot of your viewers or listeners may be familiar with what are commonly called extremity tourniquets. You see someone putting it on their arm or maybe their lower leg if they are hemorrhaging. This particular device is a little bit larger, so it's for really traumatic wounds, particularly at the junctional areas. Think, in this case, where the leg meets the hip. So imagine someone that suffered a gunshot wound or maybe has been in an auto accident or even a commercial worksite safety issue, or had their leg blown off stepping on an IED or what have you. So it's really for really traumatic wounds where the patient will likely exsanguinate or bleed out in a couple of minutes. So this particular device wraps around the patient's waist, is easily secured and easily deployed to occlude the femoral artery that's in that, I'll say in layman's terms, the hip crease. We're also working on a secondary indication, which would be here for the axilla or the shoulder region. Imagine someone that's had a massive wound and they're bleeding out here, where the device can go in and occlude the same or similar artery that's in this location anatomically. So the real essence of the device is it's more simple, faster, easier to use than currently available devices. Sort of the design criteria originally were it needed to be able to be deployed by a non-medical person in an emergency situation, under high stress, maybe low or no light, with obviously a lot of liquid or blood on the person's hands. So those were the driving design criteria for my two co-founders, one of which is an emergency care physician, surgeon, critical care doc, who also happens to be a SWAT medic. And then the other co-founder and inventor is a career law enforcement officer with the Ohio State Highway Patrol, who also happens to have served about the last 16 years or so as the primary tactical medic for the Ohio State Highway Patrol SWAT team. Both those individuals do a lot of tactical medical training, particularly in the state of Ohio. So that was really the genesis of the product, was their own experience using currently available devices and lamenting their own dissatisfaction with size, weight, speed, ease of use, cost, etc., that led to the development of the current device, the Journiquet.
Amazing. So, with your experience in both public and private sectors, how has that shaped your approach to leadership and governance?
Yeah, I think my analogy is I've got this really eclectic tool bag, having, I would say being blessed working in Fortune 50 companies like Medtronic all the way through a true de novo startup like HDO Health and virtually kind of everything in between in terms of company ownership. So publicly held, privately held, venture capital backed, PE backed, and then privately funded. So it's really shaped my perspective, and I've kind of seen what it looks like at the top end, like really well funded, really sophisticated organizations like Medtronic, and then kind of the whole cascade kind of down the market through everything I've described. So I think it gives me a unique perspective. Number one, seeing what, I don't want to say what right looks like, but what big looks like at a company like a Medtronic or a Zimmer Biomet. And then kind of going down the hill, if you will, of companies that may be less well funded or less well developed. But I think what it's given for me personally as a leader is a really robust, eclectic tool bag, I like to call it, of tools, both operational tools, relational tools. And then as a moving into governance, really understanding what it's like to be an operator, both in sales, marketing, operations, communications, and then being able to zoom out effectively as a board member and provide good guidance and connections as a fiduciary or advisory board member. And I think the other part of that is having been a CEO in a few companies is kind of understanding what that wearing that hat looks like. And then candidly at HDO Health, wearing a lot of hats as the business co-founder or founder. As I mentioned, I've got a doctor. We have a law enforcement officer, and then our fourth co-founder is actually a PhD professor at Ohio State. So it's a little bit of like Gilligan's Island, but I think what it gives me is just good perspective. I might not always have all the answers, but I have a pretty good idea of where to go to find an answer. Or I know someone in my network from one of the companies I've worked at previously that probably has a good idea of where to find the answer or a resource that could help me in my company, or in a lot of cases help other entrepreneurs or people in my network. So,
I think it's really important to have that bench, right? I mean, once you have sort of, I mean, whether it's a tool bag, like you said, you've seen what good looks like, so now more or less building that is one thing. Um,
yeah,
I also think, as well, we also see some of the struggles that larger companies have, as well. And I used to, constantly say with some of the companies that I worked for, that it was a bit like, having, the vision of an albatross taking off, right? So you have a
yeah,
really large bird needs a really long runway, and if they don't have it, they're just not going to make it. They're not going to clear the trees or whatever it is in front of them.
sure.
And with big companies, that's typically the way it is. The nice thing with smaller companies is they can pivot quickly and sort of react to more market, dynamics and things like that. But I also feel like that also has some downside as well, because, if you pivot too much, or you spend too much time on the wrong thing, it's also taking away from your opportunity as well. So, I mean, there's this mix of things that all of us have to sort of learn, and having, again, friends and family and a network to kind of draw from, hopefully they can sort of help guide as well.
For sure. And I think for me as a startup CEO, one of the things I invested a lot of time and attention in is building an advisory board. And ours is probably a little bit larger than most. We have, I think, 18 active advisors, but that was sort of by design for me as a first time founding CEO, wanting to have subject matter experts. So we're very fortunate we have members that represent uh, combat medicine in virtually all branches of the military. So Army, Navy, Air Force, and the Marine Corps. Civilian law enforcement, fire, EMS, and then a good mix of folks from medical devices in both M&A, sales, marketing, technology transfer. We have an advisory board member that's also in the regulatory community, and then even sort of things outside of the realm of our specific industry, human capital, 3PL, logistics. So anyway, I think I like to say I put my money where my mouth is, and not having all those people just be people that I know, but leveraging our extended network to bring a really good group of advisors to the table that are kind of aligned with our mission and vision and support where we want to go. Not only with our first device, but as we add more products to our portfolio down the road. I think that's important. So.
Also important. I would imagine, though, too, your military background has to also influence your leadership style. How does it influence that and your decision making process in the business world?
Yeah, it definitely has left, I'd say, imprint on my DNA as a leader. My time I spent in the Marine Corps. I guess all the things you would assume someone would learn in the military, particularly as an infantry officer in the Marine Corps. So a lot of things around um, principle focused leadership. The mission is really, really important, but also taking care of your team is important. I think that has shown up in virtually every leadership role that I've held since the military. I think the other thing is, that results matter. So my personal tagline is leadership, character, and results. Like I think if you have strong leadership and you are able to demonstrate that in what you do on a day-to-day basis, you intertwine that with strong character, meaning you're going to do what you say you're going to do, and you have integrity, generally leads to good results. So I think all of those things were really foundational for my time in the military that I've really brought into every leadership role, including what I do both as an entrepreneur, as an executive coach as well. It really underpins everything. So.
Absolutely. Well, I definitely is something that would be good to be able to leverage, especially in chaotic situations. I would imagine as well. And then
Absolutely.
given some of the individuals that you have, directly interacting with the company, being in the police force and interacting with SWAT teams and things like that, I would imagine the same sort of understanding of what it would be like to be in some of these situations is absolutely critical, for your product and for the patients that hopefully you'll get to care for as well.
Yeah, I think it does give a certain level of credibility. Certainly not claiming to be an expert, particularly not in combat medicine, but I think I understand the mindset, particularly of the end user. In the case of the military, even beyond people that might have a healthcare MOS or job description. So think like the average grunt, if you will. Like, how would he or she react to this device? Would they want to carry it? Would they use it? I think that's been the most encouraging thing for me as the CEO of HDO Health is the incredible user feedback we've received. Not only the quantity of feedback, a couple of hundred end users have had their hands on our device, but really more the fact that, as you might imagine, people that are in the military or even law enforcement generally not people that would be shy about giving you critical product feedback. If you know what I mean, if they think your product is no good, they're probably going to tell you this is junk. I would never use this, or I wouldn't carry this in my kit. We're fortunate, and then pretty much universally, we've had good feedback from anyone who's had their hands on our device, really asking like, "Hey, yeah, this is good. I would put this in my bag or my kit or my truck or vehicle or whatever. Where do I get one, or how do I order one?" That's what's really carried me through the difficult days when you're struggling to raise funding or you don't win a pitch competition or what have you. Knowing that we have great user feedback, I feel like we have excellent product market fit is what continues to drive me beyond the big picture of ultimately for me and my co-founders. It's we're producing something that's Lord willing going to save someone's life. So even just the life legacy as an entrepreneur or leader, say, hey, I was a small part in bringing some technology to the world, essentially, that ultimately saved someone's life in a really critical moment when they were gravely wounded or injured is another motivating factor for me.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
As the founding president of the Alabama chapter of the Private Directors Association, what do you see as the most critical governance challenges facing private companies today?
Yeah, that could be a whole separate podcast, I think. But generally speaking, very similar issues to facing executive teams. Certainly, um, broad brush risk, whether that's related to cybersecurity, whether that's related to supply chain, whether that's related to capital access, I think are all key issues. And then I think more recently, I think it's changing a bit, but the role of DE&I or ESG sort of in board speak, I think, how a board is tackling that or ignoring that, depending on the board. And then I also think another key issue is just board composition, particularly through privately held companies or even family owned businesses who may not currently have a fiduciary board. Like really understanding the data that supports the value of having independent fiduciary board members, I think is pretty compelling. And then when you go to recruit a board member, certainly you want to leverage your network, but not having your fiduciary board just be friends and family of the CEO or the founder, but truly independent board members that are bringing a level of professionalism and understanding of what is the role of a board member, what are the contemporary issues that boards should be wrestling with, and then bringing a strong, solid opinion that you can offer value to not only the CEO but the entire executive team as a board member. And then, importantly as well as leveraging your network, whether that's for business development or partnerships or M&A, I think are all things. But shorter answer is a big picture, I would say, is risk and then, board composition and board performance, generally speaking.
Yeah, it's interesting that I mean the importance of having the right board members and then also leveraging their experience. I've seen both sides, right? I would say in my corporate life, one where there's a level of sort of concern about, sharing certain things with the board and being transparent with the board. But then there are other companies that I've been a part of where the executive team is very transparent with the board and leveraging their skills in a almost like an amplified way, and just saying, hey, look,
Yeah,
we have an executive team that's very small, and that team now is going to leverage these, kind of this broader network of individuals and their experience and all the ways that they could possibly help us. And hey, if they criticize a few things here and there, they just might do that, but at the same time, that criticism will help make us all stronger. So let's, sort of face into it. It's just a really interesting, sort of difference, overall. And I've also interviewed here on the show Brad Feld a couple of times
oh
around his
wow, yeah,
experience in, boards and how we should all leverage, the experience of boards. And I really appreciated his input as well, because I feel like it's, again, he has similar sort of thoughts to yours, which is, hey, look, you should definitely leverage their experience, but also make sure that you have a board that essentially can support the things that might be blind spots for you in your organization. So, yeah.
absolutely, yeah, and obviously he's quite literally kind of wrote the book on a lot of those topics. So yeah, I would say the other critical thing around that topic is just being open if you're a CEO to your point of board feedback. In my first CEO role, the gentleman that I had as my sort of mentor and executive coach, one of the biggest things he stressed was, Bryan, do not ever surprise your board. Like if you take nothing away from any of our conversations. So I took that advice to heart, and I've tried to strive to. I think clear, transparent communication, particularly around difficult topics, is always better than trying to give a flashy PowerPoint and not really get to the heart of the issues, because they're probably going to know anyway. And I think you just lose credibility as a CEO if you're not straight up about it. And even, giving people a heads up when things are even percolating to become a problem. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Probably not an easy conversation to have overall.
no.
So, in terms of the things that you've taken from your experience, from larger corporations, Medtronic or Abbott Laboratories, how has it informed your approach to running a startup like HDO Health?
Yeah, I think what it gives me is a lot of, I'll go back to the tool bag analogy. Like I have a lot of process, policy, knowledge, tools, templates, examples. So I didn't have to do a lot of reinventing of the wheel. Like, okay, I've seen what a strong HR policy looks like, or I know, generally speaking, around the IP world, what needs to be done there. I've seen kind of the 510K process run in a large organization. Um, Same with product development. Okay, I've seen how that works in a really sophisticated organization with a mature PMO. So I think it's really more than anything kind of given me a lot of good tools. But you obviously have to leverage appropriately and scale down or scale up or choose to ignore. But I think it's just given me a lot of good perspective and tools that I can bring to the table pretty quickly without having to reinvent the wheel or go pay for something that I probably have just from previous experience or at least knowledge of. I think that's been the biggest help. Other
Yeah.
than the network, I call it the Medtronic Mafia. People that I work together, in the spine and biologics business that are now maybe leading other large, med tech companies or life science companies. I think the Medtronic network is strong. Same with other companies, but I think particularly that one, you have that if someone's was a colleague at Medtronic, generally speaking, it's an open door and they're willing to help with whatever you might need. So,
Excellent.
yeah.
So, what are the next steps for the HGO tourniquet? And what do you need to do in terms of bringing it to market, and what challenges do you anticipate?
Yeah, for us, it's pretty straightforward. It's funding. We are, looking to and need to raise a seed round of funding to get our product through final cadaveric testing. We need to do some perfused cadaver testing to essentially have the data to submit for our 510K that the device works on a human with simulated blood flow, and then all the requirements around documentation, and a summative study for the FDA 510K submission. So it's primarily funding to complete that work. I mean, fortunately, we have a pretty good idea of exactly what we need to do, and generally speaking, more or less how much it's going to cost us, because we've had plenty of time and space to do that work. We also did a pre-submission last year and got really good feedback from our assigned reviewers. So again, we have a pretty good detail on that. So the short answer is we just need some funding to complete all that to enable us to get the product through the FDA, and then obviously to work with our contract manufacturer to produce an initial bolus of inventory. We already have some distribution partners lined up that are other service disabled veteran owned businesses that already are on the GSA contracts. So they have a contract vehicle where this would just be a new part number added to what they're already doing. So that's our primary obstacle that remains, is just funding to sort of complete the regulatory hurdle, to get it available to market with a clearance.
Very good. How do you see the future of medical device innovation, and particularly in emergency and trauma care?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I thought a lot about. I think number one, I think it is becoming and should remain to be more user focused. Like, so less IP generated at some government lab. Hey, I have this great idea. I want to do this research project, and maybe it'll become so maybe less of that and more, maybe more like the model that we had at HDO Health, where it was really based on intimate user knowledge and feedback, and then gathering more of those design requirements from other users that drove, a completely laser focused, in this case, warfighter focused design process. So I think that's one element. I think it's also continued focus on dual use technologies. It's great to produce something that's just for the military, but I think the ones that are the real winners that have a commercial market application as well, like we believe ours does with, fire EMS, and then eventually with an over the counter clearance, being able to sell direct to consumers even. So if any preppers are listening to this podcast, you're definitely one of our key target segments when we're able to sell our product direct to consumer. Would be, we think every prepper would want to have one of our devices in their kit. But the short answer is user or warfighter centered design criteria, and then focus on dual use technologies that have a market life beyond whatever the application might be in the military.
I mean, it's interesting to hear just kind of the broad capability and reach that this device could have as well, right? But everything from
Sure.
potentially warfare to the police in your backyard to the prepper that might need this as well.
Well, yeah, it's unfortunate. Even things like what recently happened in New Orleans, where people are out enjoying themselves, and all of a sudden a vehicle. Even things like that, where people are experiencing fairly traumatic wounds. Imagine if the police in that area had this device available in their, either on their person or in their vehicle. Not to say that it would anyway. Even things like that, I think people don't realize until you need this device. You're like, oh my goodness, this could literally save a life, and be able to be applied by anybody, not just law enforcement or EMS. But yeah,
So important.
yeah,
So you mentioned at the very beginning, whenever you did your intro, that you're an executive coach as
yeah,
well.
yeah.
And one of my favorite questions to ask people, because I love these interviews. I love the conversations that we get to have. But what is the most common leadership challenge you encounter when working with emerging leaders and entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I call it the three C's: um, communication or lack thereof, clarity, and that could be clarity like what's important to them, what are they even doing, why are they doing what they're doing, why are they trying to do this next thing in their career, get promoted or what have you. And the last is confidence, which could be a couple different dimensions. One, executive presence, or hey, I just got promoted. I was a individual contributor. Now I'm the leader. Ooh, what do I do now? Or I just got my first CEO role. I've got this board. What does that mean? How do I develop that relationship? So again, communication, clarity, and competence. I think of all the conversations, both mentoring and paid executive coaching, most of the issues tend to fall in one of those three buckets, in my experience.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that it with a lot with with a lot of different leaders as well. And the in terms of I mean, the interesting thing that ran through my mind with regards to clarity, I I oftentimes, so I'll write an email that I believe it covers all the key points. And as you
Yeah.
read through it and read through it, your brain just sorts, I feel like starts to cover up gaps that that people are going to have on the other side. And interestingly enough, I have used AI a few times, especially recently, just to make sure that, hey, look, does this email come across right? And is there anything else that I could write better? And I thought it was funny because in the last couple days, there were a couple of emails that I sort of stuck in that were, I felt like really critical messages. And
Yeah.
what came back was actually in my mind worse than what I'd written. And I was like, well, actually, that should make me feel better about, I guess, whatever I wrote. Because if the AI is just sort of adding words and making it more
Yeah.
complicated, it's not going to help anyway.
Yeah, I agree. Buyer beware on the AI tools. They can be great, but I wouldn't. I would always not let the AI have the last word, if you will, because you might get something you're not expecting. Yeah.
That's for sure. So, what is the greatest piece of leadership advice that you've ever received?
It's probably one that other people have heard, and I don't know. Sometimes John Maxwell gets credit for this or others, but it's the idea that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Which kind of goes back to even some of the things I mentioned about my Marine Corps experience. I think it's leadership, in my opinion, is a blessing and a high responsibility. A lot of people think, "Oh, I've been promoted. I'm now whatever title I've arrived." Like it's really not. Shouldn't be like that. It's actually the opposite. Like, yeah, you've arrived in a position of great responsibility that you should take seriously, and even view as like, I can't screw this up because now I'm responsible for other people's livelihoods or their families or their career growth. So it's really that. Like you might be the smartest person in the room, or even the most experienced, but sometimes that doesn't matter if people don't trust you, or you can't communicate effectively, or you can't demonstrate empathy or care. So I think it's really about leading with the heart first. And once you do that, I think the sky's the limit. Once you have people believing in you and trusting you and knowing that you've got their best interest in mind.
Well, thank you for sharing that. What
Yeah,
inspires you?
a lot of things, but I would say at this point in my life and career, it's my wife, Erin. Um, yeah, I would say years ago it would have been like, oh, what's this business person? Or it's really her. I mean, she's a kindergarten teacher, and to see the impact that she makes with her students and the passion she brings to teaching and creating a joy of learning in these young kids is amazing. And then she's also a registered behavioral therapist. So to see her work with, in this most recent case, a very profoundly autistic young man who's nonverbal, and she can connect with him in ways that's like it really defies explanation. Like he uses a talker, but he can communicate with her in ways that like no one else. Like, well, she knows exactly what he's thinking or what he's trying to say, and everyone else is like, wow. So she really inspires me. Both her work as a behavioral therapist and as a teacher is pretty inspiring. So
And who
shout
doesn't
out
love
to
their
Aaron. Yeah,
kindergarten teacher? I mean, come on.
yeah,
I think we all sort of fell in love with the person that was there, that was sort of that introductory
yeah.
step to not being with mom and dad day in and day out, right? So it was
Yeah, it's so
yeah.
fun when we get ready in the morning. Like her name is Erin, and her children call her Miss Erin. So now since she's been teaching more recently, I call her Miss Erin. Like, how was your day, Miss Erin? Like, she's like, please don't say that. I hear that all day anyway. Yeah,
Uh, that's funny. What
yeah.
concerns you?
I would say what has concerned me was, I guess, from a big picture, was just the general decline in society of having empathy and care for other folks, particularly if they don't agree with your viewpoint or what have you, like a general degradation of people just like being civil. And then, just the proliferation of social media and that people saying things that they would never say to someone in person, but just feeling free to type whatever, um, and not weighing the impact of that on people. You know what I mean? So hopefully that's turning a little bit given recent changes, but I think that that has been a concern for me, kind of big picture. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I heard somebody said this earlier today to me, and I thought it was a beautiful quote from this individual. It was, I don't I absolutely love people in general, and
Yeah.
um, I don't care what what your background is. I don't care what your political sort of standing is. I just wanna know more about you as a human because that more
Yeah.
or less frames up really who you are, not those other things that, we constantly sort of get guided to judge people on, which I felt like it was just a beautiful, sort of moment with this particular individual where I just, took that away and just went, it's pretty powerful to just focus on those things and just tell people, "Hey, look, I don't really care about your sexual orientation. I don't care about your
Yeah.
religion. I don't care about your political standing. Who are you? And let's talk about
Yeah.
that because that's really
Yeah.
what I care about." So, yeah.
Yeah. Someone told me, I don't remember who told me this, but it's the whole, um, just strive to be interested versus interesting, like kind of get over yourself and, be present. I think a lot
Mm,
of times in today's world, when we're on these kinds of communications, in the office setting or whatever, it's easy for people to be present but not be present, meaning cameras off, I'm double tasking or whatever. But you wouldn't go to a board meeting or you wouldn't have a team meeting, or at least I hope you wouldn't, and sit at a table with someone and literally, well, I see you there, but I'm going to do this other thing the whole time. Like we wouldn't do that in person. So I think that's same thing. Just be present. I think is always helpful. You
absolutely. Last
know?
question. What excites you?
A lot of things lately. I mean, hopefully your listeners can tell I love to learn. So mentoring and coaching excites me. Certainly, leading a business, as an entrepreneur, that's great and all. But really, what really fulfills me and what gets me the most excitement is just opportunities to coach or mentor others. Whether it's a paid coaching gig with another executive, or whether it's mentoring a transitioning military veteran who is getting out of the Navy and wants to get into healthcare and has no clue what to do. That's really what is my passion. I think my ultimate purpose is that. So that's what excites me. And then maybe parallel to that is, hopefully future opportunities to serve on more boards and have an impact helping other executives, optimize their companies for their own benefit and their employees as well as their customers. So that's really what excites me at the moment. And I'll just have to add, um, my wife and I are excited to be grandparents in waiting. No one's coming yet, but my our children are at the age and the kind of season where they might be getting ready to do that. So we're excited for that season of life. So I'm excited for whenever that does happen. So
Yeah, we have 3 grandsons and then 3, two adopted, granddaughters as well, and,
wow,
yeah, it is an exciting time and,
yeah,
a lot of fun to watch, young people get older and, gain skills and things like that, and not necessarily have
sure,
to be in the household that's doing all of the heavy lifting. That's
yeah, yeah,
the
yeah,
best part. So, yes, yeah, it's,
yeah,
definitely an exciting time for sure. Yeah.
awesome.
Well, Brian Stewart, thank you so much for being on the Life Science Success podcast. I greatly appreciated our conversation here, and I loved hearing more about HDO Health and what you're working on with the Journiquet. And I wish you all the best. And thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity and great to connect with you as well.
Thanks.